mum used to say things like, the Co-op, you can be born into it, live your life in it, and eventually the Co-op will bury you.
The Co-op was a respectful shop and a friendly shop.
Looking back now, didn't realise how good it was, for the family.
From birth to death it used to be.
When I was growing up in Liverpool in the 50s, we lived in West Derby, and we had a local Co-op and all the shopping was done at the Co-op. So you go for your mother, you know the divvy number, which all older people know the mother's divvy number. You gave your divvy number in at the shop and they tossed it all up, and then every 6 months you got a dividend back.
I was born and brought up in Fincham Road. Part of Fincham Road is in Highton and part of Fincham Road is in Dovecot. And I was born in the Dovecot, and in fact I think we were the last house in Liverpool before Highton began. And 10 minutes walk from our house was Finch Lane, and it was in Finch Lane that the Co-op shop. It was near to Yew Tree Cemetery and Yew Tree Pub. It's quite a small shop in a row of shops there.
I remember vividly in the 50s going to the Co-op for my mother. The Co-op was on Wavertree Road, and your own number remains with you. Ours was 54073. However, when you used to go on messages, which all kids did for people in the neighbourhood, they'd give you their number on a slip of paper. And I vividly remember the Co-op shops. They were small. Well, the Wavertree Road one was small, and it was quite an event going to the shops and giving the number in and getting the receipts.
You remember your mum's number then?
Oh yeah, 175793.
Great.
The old lady next door who had to go messages for 14748. It's just ingrained, because the first question your mother asked when you came back, did you give me number in? Prices were the same everywhere as well, so that's why people went to the Co-op, because you pay the same.
Not only was it cheaper, but also you got this divvy, 1 penny in the pound. My oldest brother had brought me home a pair of skates, and I learned to use them very well. But one was stolen off me, so I used to go around on one skate, and I'd often go to the Co-op shop on the one skate, and I became quite an expert on one skate. But it was good for carrying back the bag. You used to rest the bag on the foot which was on the skate and scoot along, and made it easier to go shopping.
In the early 50s, a lot of areas were bombed, and the playgrounds for most children we used to call them bombed hollers, and going to the shops was somewhat of a treat. But in them days, any neighbour who called you if you were playing football or anything, you had to go, and you had the respect of all the neighbours.
I was only 2 when the war broke out, so I probably started going shopping there when the war was over. But there was still rationing of different foods, and every member of the family had their ration book. And when you went to the shop, and you had to carry your ration book with you, and if you wanted, say, half a pound of butter, that would probably have to be booked in probably 2, if not 3 ration books, and they'd scribble on the ration book that you'd had the butter. And sometimes, I think sometimes deliberately, they would scribble on it with a pencil, so that when you'd used up your ration of butter, your mother could rub out the pencil marks and send you back to the shop to get more.
Well, I can remember the Co-op on Lodge Lane. Our number was 96180, and we'd cut through going to my grandmother's, and then when we moved house growing up with my brothers and sisters, we lived opposite the Co-op in Conyers Street, Kirkdale, by Everton Valley.
I know that when I say it to my sister, she can say my mum's Co-op number, not her. She can say my mum's Co-op number straight off the top of the head. Even just the other week at the football match, I mentioned that I was doing something about the Co-op, and a friend of mine at the football said, oh yeah, the Co-op 7846327, and he said, that's my Co-op number, I'll never forget it.
You were given a penny in the pound, what they call dividend, or what they call in Liverpool, the divvy. So every time you went to the shop, you paid for what you got, and the assistant would say, "What's your number? What's your divvy number?" And you say 58689, and then that would be written on a little ticket.
We lived by the Co-op dairy, and I used to be able to go into our bathroom toilet at the end of the day, and my mum would say, "See if there's many cakes left." And I used to stand on the toilet seat, open the bathroom window, toilet window, and I'd look down and I could see the Co-op yard, and they'd have some cakes left, and it was the end of the day and they had to sell them off. And my mum would send me down to buy a cake cheap.
I remember going for milk and the butter, because they'd pack the butter, they'd cut it off a block and pack it on the greaseproof paper, and you'd buy blocks of salt in there, which is unheard of now. And it was next to the dairy, and they had the cows in the yard for the dairy.
My mother was divorced with 3 kids, and in the 50s that was hard going, no child benefits or anything like that. So when she got her divvy, it was straight off to Unity House. Unity House was in Barrow Street, just round the corner from Dale Street, where the flyover is now. And they sold school uniforms and stuff like that.
My mum would say, you know, we've got so much on the divvy, you can go over to the Co-op and buy, or the Co-E, and buy yourself something on the divvy, which was something fantastic. But when I got to teenage years and I wanted to look really cool, I used to go to the big Co-op, really big Co-op, 4 or 5 stories high in London Road, and I used to go on the very top floor, and they used to sell sort of like old fashioned in a way shirts and clothes. Actually, when I was a teenager, it was the early 60s, so I used to buy collarless shirts that they would sell, you know, for the working men, which had gone out of fashion, but I loved them because they looked really cool. So I used to buy lots of old stuff from the 40s and the 50s in the Co-op and dress up like a sort of retro style in the 1960s.
My mother had 10 children, and there was always one of us or 2 of us or more of us who needed new shoes or a new suit for school or school uniform, all those different things that you can happen in an emergency. And most of the time we lived in poverty there. You just couldn't go and buy a suit or a pair of shoes or a jumper or a new shirt or whatever, because you simply didn't have the money. So the divvy came in very, very handy.
So it was straight down to Unity House with a divvy to buy clothes for the kids, and if it wasn't uniforms, it was shoes and stuff like that. And I used to love going there because they had this system where the sales assistants didn't handle cash. They put it in a canister, and they went flying across to on wires to this person sort of high up, and put the change in it, and it went whizzing back to the counter where you were, and the sales assistant there unscrewed it and gave you the change.
Put the money in, and they'd let it go, and it'd shoot up, and then it'd go boom, right across the room, and they'd all be going at different ways, and in the middle of the room was the cashier. She'd take the bill out, you know, and put the change in and pull it, and it would zoom back to that department. So as a kid, I used to watch all these things. I thought they were fantastic. It was like having a little day out.
And I can remember putting the money in the tube, sliding along, and it used to be a little adventure going from one to another, watching the money swimming round the ceiling and not knowing as a child who was at the other end or where the things were coming from.
A lot of the shops years ago had lads who worked at delivering the groceries, and the Co-ops had order bikes with the young boys who were doing Saturday jobs and jobs after school delivering groceries around the local neighbourhoods, because a lot of people used the Co-op because they were such a friendly place, and they paid the dividends at the end of the year.
When they had the boys delivering the groceries round the street, when they'd finish or on the way back, they had a big metal frame basket, and you'd see them with the friends sitting on the front and their legs dangling over, coming down the streets, you know, and you'd always want them to say, do you want to get on the bike, you know, waiting for the ride. So it was good, and it gave jobs to kids.
And we always thought that the lads in the front of the bike being carried on my mates, that's where you bought boys from, the Co-op.
My mum used to say things like, the Co-op, you can be born into it, live your life in it, and eventually the Co-op will bury you. So from birth to death it used to be. And interestingly, I've actually been to a wedding, birth, marriage and death. I've been to a wedding in a co-op. I remember about 1966 going to a really big co-op hall where there was a big wedding with a dance and stuff up in West Derby in Liverpool. That says something because, of course, in them days, the co-ops, the big co-ops, usually had a hall over them, and in the local community, you hide that for a birth or a wedding or any celebrations. And of course, famously, the Beatles played at Blair Hall, the co-op on Walton Road.
I remember when I got married, I was only 18, and my mother said to me, the insurance man will be round next week, you've got to insure yourselves. And we did. We insured ourselves with the co-op, and when my parents died, they were buried from the co-op, and my brothers and sister.
So that's what the co-op meant to us when we were growing up. It was because times were hard and people shop from day to day, basically live from day to day.
And the co-op was a respectful shop and a friendly shop, and most of the goods, that's why most people used the co-op, were cheap, people friendly, and as my wife said, you used to get a dividend at the end of the day.
You valued it because the goods in the shop were quite cheap, probably cheaper than other surrounding shops. But it was a way of saving money easily for emergencies.
Ordinary people organising things for themselves, and to me that's the co-op. Our existence is that we are different and we have these values.
So it's gone on right through my life from I was born, and I'm still using the co-op now.
Also the life revolved around the co-op. We got everything from the co-op, and it was just normal. That's the way it was,
Looking back now, didn't realise how good it was, for the family.
So I think it's good to say that the co-op is a place that's with you from the minute you're born till the end. We never said co-op, co-e.